The text message glowed on my phone screen, a beacon of casual deception in the darkness of my car. Late training session, babe. Hitting a new PR. Don't wait up. I stared at the words, my husband Mark's cheerful lie, and then lifted my gaze to the gym parking lot. His silver sedan was parked near the entrance, exactly where he'd said it would be. For a moment, a wave of relief so powerful it felt like nausea washed over me. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the gnawing suspicion that had been eating me alive for weeks was just paranoia, a symptom of the insecurity he so often reminded me I needed to work on. But then the gym's glass doors swung open, spilling a rectangle of fluorescent light onto the asphalt. It wasn't Mark who emerged. It was Chloe, our personal trainer, her athletic frame silhouetted against the bright interior. She walked a few paces, then turned, a smile playing on her lips as Mark stepped out after her. They weren't wearing workout clothes. He was in the crisp button-down he'd worn to the office, and she was in a dress that clung to her sculpted physique. They stopped beside his car, and the world seemed to slow down, the ambient sounds of the city fading into a dull hum in my ears. He said something, and she laughed, a sound I knew well, a sound I'd once associated with encouragement and motivation during my own grueling sessions. He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek, and my breath caught in my throat, a sharp, painful gasp. Then he leaned in, and they kissed. It wasn't a quick, friendly peck. It was a deep, lingering kiss, the kind shared between two people who believe they are completely alone, unburdened by secrets because they think no one is watching. My world, which had felt fragile for months, didn't just crack, it atomized, disappearing into a cold, silent void. The woman in the driver's seat, the woman whose hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white, was a stranger to me. The old me, the one from an hour ago, would have dissolved into tears. She would have felt the familiar, crushing weight of inadequacy, believing this was somehow her fault, another testament to her failings as a wife. But the physical strength I had so painstakingly built over the past year, the muscles I had torn down and rebuilt under Chloe's watchful eye, seemed to have forged something new inside me, a core of steel. As I watched my husband, the man who had promised to love and protect me, whisper something into his lover's ear before they got into his car and drove away, a single, chillingly calm thought surfaced from the wreckage of my heart. He thinks I'm too weak to notice. He thinks I'm too dependent to do anything about it. He and she were about to find out just how strong I had really become. The journey to this moment had been a masterclass in manipulation, and I had been the star pupil, utterly oblivious. 3 years earlier, I was a different person, soft in body and spirit after the birth of our son, Leo. Mark had been my champion then, or so I thought. "Let's get you back to feeling like yourself, Sarah," he'd said, his voice laced with what I mistook for concern. "You deserve to feel strong and confident." His encouragement, however, was a Trojan horse. Over time, it soured, the gentle nudges becoming sharp critiques. My progress was never fast enough. My dedication was always questionable. "You're letting yourself go," he'd sigh, looking at the slight roundness of my stomach that lingered after childbirth. "You've lost that spark you used to have." I absorbed every criticism, each one a small crack in my already fragile self-esteem. I believed him. I believed I was failing, that I was a disappointment. So, when he announced he'd hired the best personal trainer in the city for me, I was flooded with gratitude. He was investing in me. He still cared. That trainer was Chloe. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of energy, perfectly sculpted muscles, and unwavering confidence. She was everything I wasn't, and I was in awe. In the beginning, she was my savior. She pushed me past limits I never thought I could break. She taught me the difference between pain that harms and pain that builds. "Your body can do this, Sarah," she'd say, her voice firm but encouraging as my muscles screamed. "It's your mind you have to convince." And I did. Week by week, I grew stronger. I could lift more, run farther, and hold a plank for what felt like an eternity. I saw the changes in the mirror, the new lines of definition in my arms and legs, the way my clothes fit differently. But as my physical strength grew, my emotional resilience withered under Mark's relentless campaign of psychological warfare. He'd weaponize my progress, turning it into another tool for comparison. "Chloe said you had a great session," he'd comment, "but you still look tired all the time. Are you sure you're getting enough protein?" He began attending his own extra sessions with Chloe, framing it as a way for them to strategize my fitness plan. I felt a flicker of unease, but I extinguished it immediately. Why would I be suspicious of the two people who were working so hard to help me? They developed an easy rapport, a shorthand of inside jokes and shared glances that excluded me. "It's just gym talk, babe," Mark would say, dismissing my tentative questions. "You wouldn't get it." The final, most devastating move came 3 months ago. Mark approached me one evening, his face serious, a portfolio of documents in his hand. "Chloe has an amazing opportunity," he began, his voice filled with a manufactured excitement. "She wants to expand the gym, buy new equipment, and bring in more specialized trainers. She's looking for investors." I was hesitant. Most of our savings were from an inheritance my grandmother had left me, a nest egg I guarded fiercely for Leo's future. "It's a big risk, Mark," I said. He took my hands, his expression softening into one of patronizing tenderness. "It's not a risk, Sarah. It's an investment in you, in us. Think about it. We'd be part owners. This place has become your second home. Chloe has changed your life. Don't you think we should support the person who helped you find your strength again?" He made me feel like any hesitation was a betrayal, a sign of ingratitude. He presented it as a way for me to take ownership of my transformation, to become a partner in the very place that had rebuilt me. He handled all the paperwork, of course, citing his superior business acumen. "It's complicated stuff, babe. Don't worry your pretty little head about it," he'd said, a phrase that once sounded protective but now echoed in my mind as deeply dismissive. I just signed where he told me to sign, my signature on the dotted line sealing my own financial ruin. I was so blinded by the desire for his approval, so desperate to prove I wasn't the weak, indecisive woman he painted me as, that I willingly handed him the knife he would use to sever our life together. And now, sitting in my car in that dark parking lot, the ghost of their kiss burned into my memory, I finally understood. The gym wasn't my second home, it was the headquarters for their conspiracy. Chloe hadn't just been training my body, she had been helping Mark groom me for abandonment, strengthening my muscles while he systematically weakened my will, ensuring that when they finally made their move, I would be too broken to fight back. They had miscalculated. They had focused so much on my perceived emotional weakness that they had completely overlooked the one thing Chloe had successfully taught me: discipline. And I was about to apply that discipline to a new kind of training regimen, one focused on dismantling their lives with the same methodical precision I now use to lift weights. The old Sarah was gone, and the woman who took her place was ready for war. My first move was to drive home and walk through the front door as if nothing had happened. The house was quiet, filled with the evidence of a life that was now a lie. Photographs on the mantelpiece showed a smiling, happy family. Leo's toys were scattered in the living room. Our wedding album sat on the coffee table. I ran my fingers over the embossed cover, feeling nothing but a profound, icy detachment. When Mark arrived an hour later, he was the picture of the devoted husband, feigning exhaustion from his intense workout. "Hey, you're still up," he said, kissing my forehead. The scent of Chloe's perfume, a fragrance I had once complimented, clung to him like a shroud. "How was the session?" I asked, my voice even, a perfect imitation of my former self. "Brutal," he sighed, heading for the shower. "Chloe is a machine, but I hit that new personal record. Totally worth it." The ease with which he lied was breathtaking. I had spent years believing I was the broken one in our marriage, but I was looking at a man whose very soul was fractured, held together only by a web of deceit. That night, as he slept beside me, I did not cry. I planned. I lay awake for hours, my mind a whirlwind of strategy, channeling every ounce of pain and betrayal into a coherent course of action. I had been a meticulous record keeper of my fitness journey, with journals filled with every calorie consumed, every pound lifted, every mile run. It was time to apply that same obsessive attention to detail to Mark and Chloe's downfall. The next morning, I began my investigation. After Mark left for work and I dropped Leo at school, I returned to the silent house and went straight to our home office. He was arrogant in his deception, so sure of my passivity that he'd grown careless. The file for the gym investment was right where he'd left it, in the top drawer of his filing cabinet. I pulled out the thick stack of papers I had signed without reading. It took me less than 5 minutes to find the truth. It wasn't an investment agreement. It was a personal loan document. A loan of $200,000, the entirety of my inheritance made out not to the gym, but to Chloe personally. My signature was on every page, but the terms were predatory. The repayment schedule was laughably vague, and the interest rate was practically zero. In essence, I had gifted her my son's future. But the most damning detail was a clause on the final page, in fine print so small it was almost illegible. In the event of a default, the loan would be forgiven, and all associated business assets would transfer to the co-signer. And there, next to Chloe's signature, was Mark's. He hadn't just helped her steal my money, he had built himself a safety net, ensuring that if their little venture failed, he would be the one to inherit the gym's assets, leaving me with nothing but a devastating financial loss. He was playing both sides, positioning himself to win regardless of the outcome, with my life savings as his personal poker chips. The discovery didn't crush me, it ignited me. This was no longer just about infidelity, this was about calculated predatory fraud. I spent the rest of the day in that office, transforming into a forensic accountant of my own life. I pulled up our joint credit card statements, the ones Mark always insisted on managing because he was better with numbers. The pattern was sickeningly clear. Dozens of charges at high-end restaurants I'd never been to, billed on nights he was supposedly working late. A recurring charge for a luxury hotel in a nearby city. Always on a weekend when he claimed to be at a business conference. The dates lined up perfectly with Chloe's social media posts, where she'd share pictures from a relaxing solo getaway. They weren't just cheating. They were living a completely separate, lavish life, funded by my money, laughing at me behind my back. They had built their fantasy on the foundation of my trust, and I was about to demolish it, brick by damning brick. My mind worked with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I knew I couldn't confront them. Not yet. They would deny everything, gaslight me, and twist the narrative until I was the crazy, paranoid wife. They had underestimated me as a partner. I wouldn't allow them to underestimate me as an adversary. I needed evidence, undeniable, irrefutable proof that would leave them with no escape. The discipline Chloe had instilled in me became my greatest weapon. Every day was a new training session in the art of espionage. I created a spreadsheet, cross-referencing credit card statements with their known schedules. I documented every lie, every discrepancy, every suspicious charge. The weak, emotional woman Mark had cultivated was the perfect cover. I played the part of the dutiful, slightly needy wife to perfection. I'd ask about his day, listen to his fabricated stories about work, and express just enough concern about his long hours to seem loving, not suspicious. My performance was flawless because, in a way, it was what I had been trained to do for years. Before we get to the moment everything changed, I need to know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. I love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if you believe in the power of truth, that no lie should go unpunished, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us bring even more epic tales of life to light. Enjoy listening. The next phase of my plan required technology. I purchased a small, voice-activated recorder, no bigger than a thumb drive, and a set of keylogger software. One evening, while Mark was in the shower, I attached the recorder to the underside of the driver's seat in his car and installed the software on our home computer. It felt like a scene from a movie, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was the point of no return. I was no longer a passive victim of their betrayal. I was an active architect of their reckoning. I didn't have to wait long for the recorder to yield results. 2 days later, I retrieved it from his car while he was mowing the lawn. I sat in my closet, the door closed, headphones on, and listened to the soundtrack of my own humiliation. Their conversation was casual, almost banal, which made it all the more chilling. They talked about the gym, about a difficult client, about what to have for dinner. They sounded like any other couple. Then, Chloe's voice, dripping with disdain. Is she still moping around? Honestly, Mark, I don't know how you put up with it. She's such a drain. My husband's reply was a bitter pill. I know, but we have to be patient. Another few months, and the gym will be profitable enough to stand on its own. The lawyer said if I leave her now, she could try to claim half of it. Once we can prove it's a self-sustaining business under your name, her investment becomes irrelevant. Then I can finally file. She'll be so broken she won't even know what hit her. They laughed. They actually laughed at the thought of my devastation. Every word was a nail in the coffin of the man I thought I had married. The keylogger on the computer was just as revealing. I discovered emails between them, discussing their plans to gradually phase Mark in as a co-owner of the gym once the divorce was finalized. They had a 5-year plan, a blueprint for a future that was built entirely on my destruction, but their arrogance was their undoing. They communicated with a recklessness born of absolute confidence in my ignorance. They never imagined I would have the intelligence or the initiative to look. As I compiled my dossier of deceit, a strange calm settled over me. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of cold, hard facts. I had bank statements, loan agreements, audio recordings, and email chains. I had everything I needed to expose them, but simply leaving or confronting them privately felt insufficient. It would allow them to control the narrative, to paint me as the scorned wife seeking revenge. No, their betrayal had been a performance, played out on the stage of my life, and its final act deserved an audience. They had built their new life in the temple of my physical transformation, the gym. It was only fitting that it would also be the stage for their public crucifixion. I began to plan for the gym's upcoming Member Appreciation Night. It was their biggest event of the year, a celebration of the community they had built and a showcase for Chloe's success. Mark was set to be the guest of honor, the supportive husband and savvy investor who had helped make it all possible. He was so proud of the role he was playing, the benevolent patriarch funding his wife's passion project. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He had no idea he was preparing for his own execution. In the weeks leading up to the event, I doubled down on my training. I was at the gym every day, pushing myself harder than ever before. But my motivation had changed. I wasn't working for Mark's approval anymore. I was forging my body into a suit of armor, a physical manifestation of the mental fortitude I was discovering. Chloe saw my renewed dedication and mistook it for a sign of my continued devotion to her program. "You're on fire, Sarah," she'd say, clapping me on the back. "Mark is going to be so proud of you on appreciation night." "I certainly hope so," I would reply, my voice even, my smile a perfect mask of sincerity. "I want to make sure everyone sees the results of all your hard work." The night of the event arrived, a cool evening in late autumn. I took my time getting ready, a ritual of preparation for the battle to come. I chose my outfit with strategic care, a sleek, form-fitting black dress that highlighted the new strength in my body. It was a dress the old Sarah would have never dared to wear. I styled my hair, applied my makeup with a steady hand, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized. There was a fire in her eyes, a confidence in her posture that had never been there before. I was no longer Mark's wife or Chloe's client. I was my own creation. When I walked into the gym, it was already packed. Music was playing, members were mingling, and a sense of celebration filled the air. Mark saw me from across the room and his jaw dropped slightly. He walked over, his eyes filled with a possessive admiration that now turned my stomach. "Wow, babe, you look incredible," he said, his hand finding the small of my back. "All for you," I purred, playing my part one last time. Chloe was the star of the show, glowing with success. She moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, her arm linked with Mark's. They looked like a power couple, the king and queen of the fitness empire they had built on my back. I watched them from a distance, nursing a glass of water, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. The time for emotion was over. All that was left was execution. Around 9 o'clock, the music faded, and Chloe stepped onto a small stage at the front of the room, a microphone in her hand. The crowd quieted, their faces turned towards her expectantly. She beamed, a picture of health and success. "Thank you all so much for coming," she began, her voice resonating with practiced confidence. "When I started this gym 2 years ago, it was just a dream. But with your support, your hard work, and your dedication, we've built more than just a place to work out. We've built a community, a family." I had to hand it to her. She was a fantastic actress. She went on to thank her staff and the members, her voice filled with seemingly genuine gratitude. Then, she turned her attention to Mark, who was standing proudly at the side of the stage. "But there's one person without whom none of this would be possible," she said, her voice catching with emotion. "My friend, my mentor, and my business partner, Mark. From the very beginning, he saw the potential in this place, and in me. He believed in my vision and invested in it, not just with his money, but with his time and his unwavering support. Mark, thank you. Thank you for everything. The crowd erupted in applause. Mark stepped forward and gave her a hug, whispering something in her ear. They stood there, bathed in the spotlight, the perfect picture of professional admiration and platonic partnership. It was my cue. After the applause died down, Chloe smiled and said, "I'd be happy to take any questions or hear from any of our members about their experiences here." It was the opening I had been waiting for. I raised my hand, and a staff member, a young man I recognized from the front desk, brought a wireless microphone to me. My hand was perfectly steady as I took it. Chloe's smile wavered slightly when she saw it was me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but she recovered quickly. "Sarah, our star client. Please, share your story." "Thank you, Chloe," I began, my voice clear and amplified, cutting through the low murmur of the crowd. "I don't have a question, but I would like to make a statement. You've all heard tonight about investment, partnership, and loyalty. I think it's important for this community, this family, to have the full picture." A nervous energy began to ripple through the room. Mark's proud smile had frozen on his face. Chloe's expression was one of growing confusion and alarm. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, connecting it to the large projection monitors behind the stage that had been displaying a slideshow of gym photos. In an instant, the smiling faces were replaced by the cold, hard text of the loan agreement. "This is the investment my husband made in Chloe's dream," I announced, my voice ringing with newfound authority. "A $200,000 personal loan to Chloe, funded entirely by my own personal inheritance. An inheritance, I might add, that was meant for my son's future." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I swiped the screen, and the next image appeared, a credit card statement, with charges for a 5-star hotel and a romantic dinner for two highlighted in red. And this is one of many examples of the unwavering support he provided. This charge, for instance, was from a weekend he told me he was at a business conference. I swiped again. A screenshot of a text message exchange between them appeared, their pet names for each other stark against the white background. I didn't stop there. I played a 30-second clip from the audio recorder, just enough for everyone to hear. Chloe's voice, dripping with contempt. "She's such a drain." And Mark's reply, "Once we can prove it's a self-sustaining business under your name, her investment becomes irrelevant. Then I can finally file." The silence in the gym was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket of shock and disbelief. Every eye was now on Chloe and Mark, who stood frozen on the stage, their faces ashen masks of horror. They were trapped in the spotlight they had so eagerly sought, their web of lies now fully illuminated for the world to see. I lowered the microphone slightly, my gaze locking first with Chloe's, then with Mark's. "You were right about one thing, Chloe," I said, my voice dropping but still carrying through the silent room. "You taught me how to be strong. You taught me discipline and resilience. You made me strong enough to uncover your deception, and strong enough to stand here tonight and make sure every single person in this room sees you both for the deceitful, manipulative frauds you truly are." I then turned my full attention to my husband, the man who had systematically tried to dismantle me. "And Mark, you were right too. I have changed. I'm no longer the weak, insecure woman who waits at home for you. I am the woman who, thanks to your little loan agreement, is the primary creditor and de facto majority shareholder of this business. And as such, my first official act is to terminate the contracts of both my personal trainer and my husband. You're both fired. Get out of my gym." Chaos erupted. The stunned silence shattered into a cacophony of angry murmurs and shocked whispers. Members who had considered Chloe a friend and a mentor now stared at her with disgust. Mark's business associates, whom he had invited to witness his triumph, began backing away from him as if he were contagious. I stood my ground, a calm island in the center of the storm I had created. I watched as Mark, his face a contortion of rage and humiliation, stumbled off the stage, pulling a sobbing Chloe behind him. They didn't look at me. They couldn't. They pushed their way through the crowd of gawking, judging faces, and fled out the doors, escaping into the night. They had walked in as the king and queen of their empire, and they left as disgraced, exposed criminals. I lowered the microphone, the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by a profound sense of release. The weight I had been carrying for months, for years, was finally gone. I had not only survived their betrayal, I had conquered it on my own terms, using the very strength they had ironically helped me build. The 6 months that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, financial audits, and the slow, steady work of rebuilding. The public humiliation at the member appreciation night had been the kill shot. With the mountain of evidence I had compiled, Mark and Chloe had no legal leg to stand on. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn, dismantled their case with surgical precision. The loan was declared fraudulent, and because it was funded by my personal, premarital assets, I was granted full control of the gym. The divorce was swift and brutal for Mark. He left the marriage with nothing but his personal belongings and a mountain of legal debt. The fraud charges I pressed resulted in a plea bargain that saw him serving 2 years of probation and paying significant restitution. His reputation in the community was destroyed. Chloe fared no better. She was also named in the fraud lawsuit and was forced to declare bankruptcy. She left town shortly after, a pariah in the fitness community she had once dominated. I never saw or heard from either of them again. They simply vanished from my life, ghosts of a past I was determined to overcome. Taking over the gym was the most terrifying and empowering thing I have ever done. The first few weeks were overwhelming. I knew how to lift weights, not how to run a business, but I applied the same principles Chloe had taught me: discipline, consistency, and a willingness to learn from failure. I hired a new staff, people who valued integrity and community over ego. I rebranded the gym, changing its name from Peak Performance, a name that now felt hollow and aggressive, to the Phoenix, a symbol of my own rebirth from the ashes of my old life. I changed the focus, too. It was no longer just about aesthetics and personal records. We created programs focused on holistic wellness, mental health, and building a supportive environment, especially for women who, like me, had been made to feel small and powerless. The business didn't just survive, it thrived. People were drawn to the new philosophy, to the sense of genuine community we were building. I found a passion I never knew I had, not just for fitness, but for helping others find their own strength, both inside and out. 2 years after that fateful night, the Phoenix Gym was a cornerstone of the community. I walked through the doors one morning, the familiar scent of chalk and clean sweat filling the air, and felt a profound sense of peace. I was no longer just surviving, I was flourishing. I was a respected business owner, a single mother to a happy, well-adjusted son, and a woman who was finally, completely, comfortable in her own skin. The betrayal that was meant to destroy me had, in fact, been my salvation. It had forced me to excavate a version of myself I never knew existed, a woman of immense strength, resilience, and resolve. Mark and Chloe had intended to leave me with nothing, but in the end, they had given me everything. They had given me back to myself. My life was my own, built not on the shifting sands of someone else's approval, but on the solid bedrock of my own self-worth. That evening, as I was closing up, a new client came in for her initial consultation. She was a young woman, probably in her late 20s, with nervous eyes and shoulders that seemed to carry an invisible weight. She reminded me so much of the woman I used to be, a woman drowning in self-doubt. She told me her story, a familiar tale of a partner who chipped away at her confidence, who made her feel like she was never quite good enough. As she spoke, I didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor waiting to be born. When she was finished, I smiled, a genuine, warm smile that came from a place of deep understanding. "Welcome to the Phoenix," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I know it feels impossible right now, but you are so much stronger than you think you are." She looked at me, a flicker of hope in her tired eyes. "How do you know?" she whispered. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. "Because I've been where you are. Now, let's get to work." In that moment, I understood the true nature of my revenge. It wasn't about the public humiliation or the financial ruin I had brought upon Mark and Chloe. That was just the clearing of the debris. The real victory was this: the ability to take the pain they had inflicted and transform it into a source of power, not just for myself, but for every other woman who walked through my doors seeking a sanctuary to rebuild. They had tried to burn my world down, but they had only succeeded in lighting the fire that would guide me, and many others, out of the darkness. My happily ever after wasn't a fairy tale ending with a new prince. It was the quiet, powerful realization that I had become my own hero, rising from the ashes, stronger and more radiant than before.